Thanks for joining us. We're going to talk today about how measurement is driving growth in podcast advertising. It's certainly one of the biggest shifts that's been happening in the space right now. So we're excited to dig in a little bit more with you. So if you rewind even a few years, podcast advertising was often sold on trust and host relationships alone, and now measurement is at the front and center of every conversation, ranging from planning to optimization to scaling. So I'm Cameron. I'm one of the co-founders at Magellan AI. We are ad intelligence and attribution specifically focused on the audio space, and I'm joined by two great perspectives on this. So I've got Tamara Zubati from Barometer, and I've got Alana Vons from BBC Studios. So between measurement, brand suitability, and how campaigns actually scale, there's a lot that's changed and a lot that's still misunderstood. So Tamara, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about your background and what you're focused on at Barometer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Cameron, for the opportunity. It's so great to be up here with you both, and thank you all for being here. As Cameron said, I'm Tamara Zubati. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Barometer. Barometer is the premier brand suitability and contextual targeting solution for the podcast space. And really what we're all about is helping to grow the monetization of podcasts by making it easier for buyers and sellers to align transparently on the content so that advertisers can sponsor more content.
And I'm Alana Vons. I'm with BBC Studios. Want to just call out that BBC Studios is the commercial arm of the BBC. So all the activity really that we're focused on in terms of advertising happens outside of the UK. And I manage our ad sales relationships and partnerships. So working both with folks sort of more on the technical side, like these great folks, and also working with sales teams all around the globe who represent our great content.
Awesome. Alana, as kind of the person who's working with a lot of the content up here, how does measurement show up in your world? How does it take shape?
So I think at the end of the day, when people are trying to buy advertising, they're trying to reach audiences. And the brands we work with want to know who our audience is. Turns out we have great audiences, very smart, curious folks who really are leaning in, often showing up for our news content, but sometimes exploring other things because we do a lot more than just news. We have comedy, we have science, everything really under the sun, just because we have such a large radio output that really powers our podcast output. So at the end of the day, it's all about who is listening, and that's what we need to measure all throughout.
It's great. Tamara, where does skepticism show up most today when advertisers are evaluating campaigns?
Yeah, I think the skepticism really comes as advertisers lean more and more into podcasting, and then usually what gets them in is like a marquee title or a show that they know that they're sponsoring. But then they want to scale it because it's working, and then they start facing apprehension. What are we going to run on? What are they going to say? How do you control it? There's so many different podcasts. And so I think that's really where the initial skepticism comes from, as well as, frankly, just the skepticism of whether there is a solution that can allow brands to enforce their brand standards in podcasts the same way that they would in traditional digital channels.
Alana, what do you think, where does skepticism, where do you see it coming up the most as you encounter advertisers and work with them to get them comfortable?
Yeah, I think it's all about results. They want to make sure that whatever campaign message they're putting out into the world is actually landing, and it's getting people to actually take action. And so at the end of the day, that's why we need to kind of paint the whole picture, right? There's the beautiful creative asset, there's the great show and the host, but then we need to make sure that we're actually delivering on behalf of these brands.
So sounds like there's some reasons that brands are skeptical, but kind of curious what you guys think. What are advertisers consistently getting wrong about podcast measurement? Let's make it awkward. Tamara, I'll toss it over to you first.
So I think one big thing that people say that it feels to me like nails on a chalkboard when they say this is that podcast isn't brand safe. Love hearing that because Barometer has the great privilege of analyzing probably about 90% of the monetized podcasts out today. And that means our AI is literally listening to every single episode before it comes out, to analyze the context and the tone, not just the keywords of what's being spoken about. And less than like 0.01%, I'm totally making that number up, but it's like millions and millions and millions of episodes, and we've only really found a couple of things. Sometimes we've found pornography. In those cases, we'll report it to the publisher and they'll take it down. That's not an intentional thing. It's a user curated marketplace. But the big takeaway message is that podcasts are brand safe. Now, brand suitability, that is a conversation. Brand suitability is totally different for every brand, even for certain campaigns within a brand. It just depends on your audience that you're trying to reach. And so I think the biggest kind of misconception out there is that podcasts are just fundamentally not brand safe, and would love to dispel that myth here and challenge folks who still have that assumption.
I think for the BBC, it's, we're a news organization. So, of course, people are coming actually to us to hear the hard stuff, to understand what's going on in the world. And sometimes what's going on in the world is difficult. But these are business leaders, community leaders, people who want to understand what the things that are shaping their day-to-day and the decisions that they have to make for their own lives. So they come to us to pay attention. And I think that's something that's really important, right? Like, you don't want to necessarily carve out that audience. So sometimes we do hear brands who want to kind of pull back just at the moment that audiences are leaning in. And so that's something that we're often addressing. And then there's the contextual story as well, which is saying, for example, you want to reach women. Well, they're not just listening to true crime, right? Sometimes they want to hear about other things besides murder. So, we are just showing them that audiences are kind of in places they might not just immediately think of, right? If you want to reach sport enthusiasts, you might actually go to the Science Podcast and find them there. So we try and just help folks navigate our content slate and really make it what it's always been about, which is who is listening.
Alana, I'd like to dig in a little bit further as you think about, is the story different for brands that are new to podcasting and never advertised on podcasts before versus, more experienced buyers? Like, what would you say some of the different both, knowledge that they gain, but also maybe pitfalls that each of those two different kinds of buyers have?
Yeah, I would say that, traditionally it's the performance marketers who they really understand so much about the audio space. And a lot of times they come to you with the plan and it's done, and they're not actually, I think it's probably worth them sometimes stepping back and saying, let's chat through. We might have something that you haven't tried yet. We might have some ideas because we've been working together for a while now that are worth looking at. So I would say there, for the folks who are really versed in what's possible in audio, sometimes it's maybe don't take that totally for granted, because things are always changing on the creative side, on the technical side, on all sides. And then for brands who haven't necessarily run with audio, I think it'd be good, actually, if a lot of them maybe came to us, having more of an idea about the intricacies of audio, because it's worth being a little bit nerdy about it, because that's where the real results come from, is kind of understanding the ins and outs. And I think that's that's maybe us asking a little bit more than other mediums might do. But again, just the attention, the time that people spend listening, it's just like, it's valuable. It's worth it. It's worth it to do it right, and do it right in audio.
Tamar, what about you? What do you see the difference between advertisers that are totally new to the medium versus those that are maybe a little bit more experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like within Barometer world, we typically deal more with brand advertisers, and there's an interesting statistic that something like only 20% of the Fortune 500 have ever bought a podcast ad. The same is not true for other audio media, like streaming audio, for example. And so a big sweet spot for us is brands that have never run a podcast ad but have run a lot of streaming audio ads. And I think there are lots of interesting kind of new questions that emerge when they switch from streaming audio to podcasting. And so I think that's really where we spend the most of our time, is helping buyers, these are usually digital first buyers, create their sort of suite of like measurement, of brand suitability verification to make sure that they have the same capabilities, apples to apples, and are able to really evaluate the success of their campaigns across channels.
That's great. And I would like to, I think it's worth, we talked a little bit earlier about like what is brand safe and brand safety. And then we've kind of tossed around this word brand suitability a little bit. Could you help define kind of brand suitability and how brands should set that?
Yeah, absolutely. So whereas brand safety is a binary, content is either below the brand safety floor or effectively non-monetizable, or above the brand safety floor. Brand suitability is really a spectrum. Barometer's definitions of brand suitability are inspired by the Global Alliance for Responsible Media, RIP, for those of you who are familiar with that organization. And basically they created these 3 levels. Low risk is informative content. So thinking about the BBC, they might be discussing the war in Iran. They might be saying the word Iran 17 times in a 30-minute episode, but the way in which the reporters at the BBC are going to speak about that conflict is going to be not inflagrating. It's not going to be really sensationalized. It's going to be quite informative. Medium risk would be dramatic or entertaining. And so maybe that's an op-ed. That's kind of like the translation to news context. And then pause right there for a second. Like, people listen to podcasts to be informed and entertained. So medium risk should not be like an alarming sounding thing. It's really quite representative of a lot of the content that people listen to and come to podcasts for. And then high risk is glamorizing content or polarizing content. Again, this is not content that's not brand safe. It's just content that maybe has more fun emotions. A really good example of this is in the true crime space, like a show like My Favorite Murder. Like, they're stoked about the murder. They love it. And they're going to use really positive emotions when they talk about it. And that's okay. And we're just here to sort of quantify the difference between that and a show like Serial.
And Alana, when does brand suitability enter the conversation with an advertiser? Is that kind of the first, first words out of the advertiser's mouth usually, or is it something that you kind of like emerges from further conversations that your team is having with those advertisers?
I mean, I don't even think you have to use the word suitability to begin talking about brand suitability. It's just it's a part of the conversation, right? The whole idea is you've come to us. We're trying to find the right show, the right audience, the right fit, the right creative. Like, we're pitching in a way that's showing that we understand your brand, we understand your business, and we're here to support that. So, you don't need to literally use the word brand suitability to already go down that road. But then what's amazing now is that we can actually say we've got so much to back that up and so much to really hone in on, just what's the perfect fit, the perfect click.
Yeah, I was just going to say, how much does environment and reputation matter, especially for a publisher like BBC Studios, compared to just like formal verification, the contextual tools that are now available? Like, there's obviously like a kind of presumption from the environment that an advertiser is coming in and having a conversation with you around, but then there's also now sounds like proof.
Sorry, what's the question?
Tools versus
tools versus just
environment,
vibes.
reputation. Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Well, I think it really just depends because you don't want to make things overly complicated if you don't have to. But again, I think that kind of goes back to the conversation of like brands who are like really in the space and been there for a long time. Like, how have they entered into buying audio? And there are folks who are sort of newer and they need a bit more literal demonstration of the results. So, and then there are folks who kind of like changed their mind because of whatever reason. So it's really kind of just feeling out the relationship, what's needed, where do you need a little bit more support, where can we ride on vibes? Because yes, we know it's the BBC, we know this brand fits, it's perfect. Maybe you're advertising on other mediums across our, like on our website, et cetera. So it really depends. And I think that's what's great is that we can be flexible.
That's great. So Tamara, many brands instinctively avoid news. What does the data here actually show though about engagement and outcomes in that kind of content?
Oh, yes. I love this topic. If you ask me, I think one of the biggest reasons we started Barometer is to unblock the news. Like, that's a super important mission for us. Many brands say no news. They lead with no news. And there's just so much interesting stuff to unpack there. What is news in podcasts? News is new stuff. So there's sports news, there's entertainment news, there's tech news, there's political news, and there's global updates. But all of those different types of content are broadly categorized as the genre news. And so the consequence of blocking the genre news in audio, you're blocking everything. And so that's the first kind of point. The other thing is the compelling data about the news audience. So Alana has some first-party data from BBC, but there's many studies, one of the most notable ones is from Stagwell, about the power of the news consumer. News consumers tend to be more educated, they tend to make more money, they tend to be decision makers and leaders at their respective industries, they tend to have a lot of purchasing power. Those are the right audiences for a lot of campaigns, particularly B2B advertising. And so what kills us is when somebody comes to both of us and they'll say, well, we'd love to work with the BBC, love it, love the brand, we just don't want to run on the news. And it's like, okay. And so I think that's one of the opportunities to use a solution like Barometer, because what we do is instead of just categorizing content based on a genre, we're really looking at what is being talked about and slicing and dicing it across a variety of different categories. So you can say, are we talking about economic news, and then there won't be any discussions of war, or there wouldn't be any discussions of crime or something like that, or it's just financial crime. What exactly is being talked about, and more importantly, how is it being talked about? So that you can really tailor, instead of blocking the entire category, you might say, I would like to avoid polarizing discussions of debated sensitive social issues. That would cut maybe like 5% of the inventory compared to maybe like 30% if you cut the genre news.
Cool. It sounds like it's a lot more about nuance. And Alana, how often are advertisers actually coming in with like clear measurement frameworks versus like needing guidance on like what they actually want to measure?
I think especially for us, we're working with a lot of brands that are new to audio. So we're really guiding them based on what their past experience in other mediums. So again, it is about kind of just hearing them out. I think more and more, though, we're kind of leaning in and saying you might want to consider, these options to help track where you want to go. So I would say most of the time, folks don't know much about what's out there in terms of measurement. So.
Cool. Does it kind of vary with like the types of advertisers? Like, do you see like, what are the different types of advertisers that you see in the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to that, again, that whole conversation around performance advertisers where they're using that vanity URL, those are the folks that really already have probably measurement partners already in place. And, we can easily plug and play and work with those folks. And then with the brands, advertisers who are generally like newer to audio, we might have some recommendations. We already have some partnerships lined up that they can lean on or that we can offer. And so, again, really just flexing depending on the situation because we're there to serve the advertisers.
I think we've touched on this a little bit, but Tamara, what are the biggest mistakes brands make when structuring podcast campaigns, and how has measurement helped correct some of those?
Yeah. I think measurement has really helped kind of guide the creation of a podcast media plan to be more aligned with other types of media plans so that you can really see them all in comparison. I think some of the interesting kind of errors that we see are like using the wrong tool. Like you would use like double verify, people try to apply double verify segments, for example, in Trade Desk, and you would block every impression because there is no double verify segments for podcasts at the episode level. And if it's not tagged, then it's blocked. And so that's just a simple example of a bias. Using a measurement solution that's not designed for podcasts might not see what it is that you're intending to see if you're not measuring the medium appropriately. So I think it's just kind of it's this trade-off, like audio is special. But how do we make ourselves like not special enough that it's like mainstream enough that people can actually participate? I think that's sort of what we're kind of doing here right now is making it more templatized, working with partners like the BBC so that you have a template that you can give to a new advertiser that's tried and true, proven, I really think that's sort of the opportunity, is to use the tools designed for the medium.
Sounds like it reminds me of, Alana, what you had said around brands that, like, we're asking kind of marketers to lean in maybe a little bit more to audio specifically, and some of the tooling that's available for audio, because it's just not the same as other channels. So what's changed in the BBC Studios business as buyers have demanded better measurement, and how has that evolved in the last couple of years?
I think the biggest thing really is just internal, is making sure that our own teams, who sell so much more than podcasts, are really always updated with the newest and the greatest options. So it's really about looking at ourselves and just making sure that, we've got those partnerships lined up, so that when we're working with someone who's not as familiar, we just have a package just ready for them. So I would say the biggest thing has been just organizing internally.
Awesome. What would you say, Tamara, as what's changed as buyers have demanded better measurement from your business?
I think the biggest kind of change in growth area that we're seeing is definitely programmatic. I think in the past, when we were first getting started, the pipes weren't really there yet. And recently, with the influx of larger brands getting into podcasting, there's a demand for podcast tools to be available across the DSPs, across the different programmatic parts of the ecosystem that those buyers rely on. And I think that's a really exciting trend. Programmatic podcast advertising is the fastest growing type of programmatic advertising across all media. So while CTV is the largest overall, podcast is the fastest growing. And I think that really is a testament to the demand and the growth in the demand across these kind of digital teams and brands that are new to podcasting.
Awesome. So coming in for a landing here. So I'll ask both of you this question. Looking ahead, where is podcast measurement and or brand suitability, going next, besides all advertisers using Magellan AI?
I want to go first. I don't know. I've literally been getting so excited about this question. Because I'm having a beautiful mind moment where I can just see all the dots connecting. What I really want to be able to lean into more is that suitability piece, because just from that, you kind of take care of the safety. And it's just so cool to be able to say, we can look at every single episode, every word and every single episode, crazy. And just instantaneously get that brand connected to the most relevant episode, or that most relevant listen, and I really, really want that to be just completely unlocked, because just the creative possibilities after you can do that is just that's what gets me going and gets me going to work. I mean, the paycheck helps as well.
Tamara, what about you? Where is podcast measurement and brand suitability going next?
I feel like this is a two-part answer for me. So the first part is more customization. By default, Barometer offers 100 combinations of categories of brand suitability, so there's already a lot of customization that one can achieve. But more and more, we're getting I love the news, I just want to avoid negative discussions of this one person. Or I would like to avoid negative discussions of whatever, or I want to positively target things that are related to what it is that I'm promoting. And I think that's a really exciting opportunity, as we are now connected enough to achieve scale for some of those smaller custom segments. So that's something that makes me really excited. And of course, video. We just made our first announcement about the launch of Barometer for video podcasts. We're really excited about the premium tier of creator-led video that's emerging, and the real challenge that it poses for the historic kind of video world of CTV. Podcast brings so much more transparency, so much more power to these buyers, and a more direct connection to creators. Really, really excited to see that grow.
Awesome. We almost made it through a panel without talking about video, but we didn't succeed.
Sorry.
No, it's great. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us, and thank you to our panelists. Really appreciate you joining me up here.
Thank you.
Thank you.